The Week in Bible Prophecy, a Prophecy Watchers podcast.
Welcome, everyone, to the podcast this week. I am here with Josh Peck, Mondo Gonzales, of course, and welcome, Josh.
Thank you. Good to be back.
We are here to discuss your brand new book, The Final Cataclysm, Supernatural Signs of the End Times, and we're going to get into all the details of this, which, again, I think is pretty fascinating. But before we do, I want to remind everybody about a couple things that are happening this year. Of course, we are very, very busy. All of us are busy doing things all around, and I am traveling and speaking at different conferences as well. And a couple things that are on the agenda for us is to put on your calendar is October 9th through 12th. We have our prophecy conference in Norman, Oklahoma. We're going to have 1,000 people or so, Lord willing, coming and hearing the 20-plus speakers, which will be there. Josh, of course, you'll be there. It's easy.
Absolutely.
And
looking forward to it.
It's going to be a good time. And we're going to be taking a trip as well, if you have ever wanted to go. Basically a missionary journey of Paul trip. We're going to be seeing Athens, and we're going to go to Mars Hill, where Paul spoke to the Athenian philosophers in Acts 17. We're going to also go and see where Paul wept to the elders of Ephesus in Miletus, and we're going to go to Troas. And then, of course, we're going to have a 7 churches of Revelation tour, which will be helpful to see. It's so amazing being there. I had the first time ever in my life to be there last fall, and to walk in the different places and to see how the words of Jesus just truly come alive when you're on location there. It's pretty amazing and fascinating. And then even when I was at one of the spots in Laodicea, we know Laodicea doesn't have a very good reputation in Revelation chapter 3. And it's fascinating that as I was looking around there at the archaeology, there was an inscription that was found there that discussed they discussed all these things, but they left out the letter to Laodicea because it was very condemning of them. And so, anyways, if you're interested in joining us there, again, we're going to be heading down on a quick jaunt to Giza to see the pyramids, as well as going to Eastern Turkey to see one of the possible candidates for Noah's Ark. So you can get all that information at prophecywatchers.com. Go to the events tab and just scroll down, and you can see the different things that we will be doing. And again, our goal is to minister to people worldwide, as well as to teach at these locations if possible. So, but we are here to talk about, again, your book here as it relates to the Final Cataclysm. So, the supernatural signs of the end times, right there out of the gate, right up there at the top. I find this pretty fascinating, Josh, because we see that maybe help us make a connection with what Jesus said in Luke 17 and Matthew 24, that the days of the Son of Man, his return, not just that when he returns, but the days leading up are going to be similar to the days leading up to Noah and the days leading up to what we understand Lot as well. Kind of talk about that connection, which I think sets the tone for the whole book.
Yeah, that's what the entire 2-volume set is about, because it's showing how in all of these different areas of our modern life, these are reflections of the days of Noah and the days of Lot. And when I think about the days of Lot, I mainly think about the angels that they were trying to have relations
and
with.
And the immorality and everything else. Yep.
Of course. And that runs constant with the days of Noah as well. But also these stranger areas, like the days of Noah are marked by corruption. A lot of people think of the flood, and of course, it's the flood, but what's the cause of the flood? Like, what was the reason for it? And it was all of creation except Noah and his family were all corrupted. Well, science is now doing things today that's corrupting the creation as well. We've talked about before, but a lot of people are familiar that there's been recent news about the de-extinction of the dire wolf, which isn't really a dire wolf. It's worse. It's a hybrid of a few different things that, from what I understand, can't reproduce naturally. So these are blurring those lines where God said in Genesis, each after its own kind. These are blurring those lines and going against God's creation. So not only that, but even outside of that, they've created woolly mice. They've put woolly mammoth genetics into mice, and these are living creatures that have never existed on Earth before, as far as we can tell. Maybe in the days of Noah they did, but even then, that would have been a creation of the Nephilim or the fallen angels. But scientists are doing this today, and it's obviously all demonically inspired. But it's always promoted as like the best thing ever. Like when you see pictures of the dire wolves, for example, they're like cute little puppies, and the world is like, except for people like me and you, and like in our fringe Christian community or whatever we want to call it, except for us, most of the world, they're ecstatic about it. They're so excited, and they're adorable, and it's like. This stuff is purely demonic. Another part of it, too, that I talk about heavily in the book is the use of technology, so the use of AI. I believe in the Old Testament, a lot of this stuff was done through dark occult magic. I don't think they had a need for technology in the way that we have it. And the reason I say that is, well, in the Old Testament, dark occult magic is all over the place in there. Even so much so that the Pharaoh's servants or whatever, his magicians, were able to replicate many, not all, but many of the miracles that God was doing. And now, of course, God obviously won that. God's way more powerful, but they weren't using technology to do that.
And don't go too fast in the sense of, like, they threw down their wooden rod and it became a snake.
Yeah, it became a living creature. And there's nothing in the text that suggests that this was sleight of hand or that they like hid the stick away and put a snake down. It literally became that. And people wonder, well, if that was happening back then, why don't we see that now? Like, why can't, because there's occultists and stuff, but there's a lot of claims, but you don't really see them doing anything really special. So it's like, what's so different now? And I believe it's fully because we're in the age of grace and we have the restrainer, which I believe is the Holy Spirit dwelling in Christians. We have ancient accounts, ancient church fathers that talk about instances where Christians would go into a town and just the presence of a Holy Spirit-filled Christian would make it to where the oracle of that town couldn't talk anymore. The demon that was talking through the oracle couldn't talk anymore. There's a really famous account in Lactantius, I believe, about Apollo. And it's actually funny to read through because you got these Christians that are talking to this oracle, and Apollo's talking through the oracle, and they're asking it, what is your name? Basically, what are you? And it's trying to say, it's trying to lie and say that, it's this great God and everything, but it keeps slipping up and calling itself a demon. It's
like Balaam, he can't help it, right?
Yeah,
he's talking
exactly.
He's trying to curse, but he ends up blessing. Like, how'd that come out of my mouth?
Exactly the same thing. And it's so funny because he does this 2 or 3 times and it gets to the point where he just doesn't talk anymore. And that was, as far as we know, the last anybody's heard of Apollo. And so I think it's that restraining force that's really restraining the powers of darkness, where their power is a lot more limited now. So if you're Satan, if you're the enemy, and you can't do the magic stuff anymore, what are you going to do? Well, maybe you're going to inspire humanity at a specific time to start developing all of this technology that we're developing now. And this is why I believe that we're right on the doorstep of the end times, because everything that we're developing now, there's really no reason that couldn't have been done 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago. We have the same brains we had back then. If anything, theirs were probably better because it wasn't as degraded as we are now. They had access to the same materials. Actually, if anything, they had more time to figure this stuff out because they weren't distracted with the internet and iPhones and stuff that we have. We got a lot of distraction going on. So why didn't it happen? And I think it wasn't the time. It just wasn't the time yet. That restrainer didn't loosen up enough yet. But I think it is now, which is good news for us as believers, because that means once the restrainer is finally removed, we go along with him, and that's the rapture, in my belief. But I think we're seeing that restraining force loosen now, so we're seeing the signs of the end times, and many of them are supernatural, even though it's pitched to us as technological, like AI and everything. But I believe the actual source for all that, the inspiration for that, is supernatural. It's demonic. So that's kind of just a brief overview and a couple of examples of some of the things that I go through in the book. But every chapter deals with one topic. Some topics are so big I have to do 2 or 3 chapters, like CERN. But every chapter or group of chapters deals with one topic that's happening right now, today, and showing how this is a sign that we're in the days of Noah.
Yeah, it's to me, it's pretty fascinating when you think about, again, what the Bible says is Jesus himself. You're going to have a pattern between the days of Noah and the days of the Son of Man, and you start looking at, again, even in Genesis 6, what do we have? We have increased immorality from the time that it's everywhere, right? It's just, the Bible says, boom, from the time they're youth, every thought. I mean, that's pretty bad.
Yeah.
And what we're seeing, as well as we see supernatural interference through the sons of God coming down. We see genetic manipulation coming down. We see, of course, there's other traditions and Jewish traditions about them manipulating animals and other things like that. So Jesus is saying, look, take a look. And of course, for me, it's always about context. Jesus is speaking to first century Jewish people who understood clearly these background, these Jewish traditions that were happening. And again, not that all Jewish tradition is correct, but there was still a milieu, right? There's a situation. There's a not only a geographical but a religious and a cultural context of all those areas. This is why when you read in 2 Peter 2 or even Jude, when they're describing the situation with the angels coming down with women, and they're talking about chains of darkness, gloom, blackness, till the judgment of the great day. I remember originally when I read that a long time ago, I was like, "Where's Peter getting his information from?" I mean, maybe the Holy Spirit's telling him. That's possible. But then if you go over truly to the Book of Enoch, and I did this for one of my classes at church one time, was I took all the language and then I asked the class, show me in the Old Testament where Peter got this language about the angels, and they were like, well, we don't know. And then I pulled over here all the same language because I could search it all out of the Book of Enoch, and I said, do you guys see this? It was identical.
Yep.
I mean, it quotes from there, and I said, now again, doesn't mean the Book of Enoch is 100% inspired by any means, or any percent inspired. But what it does show us is that was the Peter's backdrop of what he's doing. And so, when we think about as well, you have this in 4 parts, which I think is fun to talk about. You have signs and technology, quantum sciences and transhumanism. You talk about part 2, signs in the supernatural, UFOs and extra-dimensional entities. You have signs in the occult, demonic doctrines and practices, again, highlighting. And then you have signs in eternity, the future for believers and what that all looks like as we go. But so let's kind of jump in here because there's of course, we can't get to all of it, but maybe of all of what you've written here, in your mind, maybe you got 2 minutes on a bus. You're on a bus or in a plane or you get an Uber or whatever, and the guy said, and you said, I see you got a new book out, Final Cataclysm. We got 2 minutes. What's the best connection evidence that you have of these supernatural signs of the end times? Give me your best in 2 minutes. What would you say?
Yeah, if it was somebody like that, I'd probably start real slow and first just present some of the basics of Genesis 6 to just get a foothold in this stuff. Really, it would depend on what the person's interests were, and that's why I wanted to deal with a bunch of different areas. What it seems like to me most people are interested in is the UFO stuff and the stuff with CERN. That's what people really seem to have a big interest in. So I would probably, maybe not as many people are aware of CERN, so I would probably start with UFO stuff, and I would say, hey, have you heard about UFOs? What do you think about that? And I would see if they've ever heard of how countless people recount their same experiences, that they seem to be doing some kind of hybridization program. They take DNA from humans and mix it with their own alien DNA, quote unquote, and then I would point back to Genesis 6, and I would say, well, in Genesis 6, it says that these were angels that were doing this. Fallen angels, yeah. And they might say, well, they were mistaken. It was really aliens, and they thought it was fallen angels. It's like, okay, well, let's explore that. And that's why I have a chapter on extra-dimensional UFOs. If these are things from another planet, there are things that the beings themselves and the crafts should not be able to do. Like, they're just impossible. The way that, let's say some of the craft, and these are coming from these accounts, and this is why I believe a lot of them, these are coming from normal lay people that have no background in quantum physics, no background in even what an extra dimension is, let alone how it would behave if it was introduced into our own. So they have no background in it, yet they're explaining things because I have researched it. I know That's exactly how an object that's extra dimensional would behave.
They're talking in language that they don't know really what
Yes.
they're talking about, and you have the scientific background to go, they don't even realize what they're saying.
Yeah, exactly. And the fact that you can have a solid object seemingly split apart, come back together, grow in size, shrink, disappear, all of that stuff is perfectly possible without technology even, if it's an object of an extra dimension. And we as humans can't really, because we're three-dimensional, in space.
Yep.
We can't imagine what a higher dimension would be like, but we can imagine, this is why I appreciate the work of Dr. Chuck Missler so much.
Yes.
We can imagine a lower dimension. We can imagine a two-dimensional universe that has no up or down. Well, if I interacted with that universe, what would that look like to them? I could put, let's call it flatland. That's the classic example from the 1800s. I could put two fingers in flatland, and any flatlander in that universe would see two separate circles.
Yep.
And I could move them around independently. They would have no idea that it was attached to one being. Well, I think it's the same thing. And if I kept doing that and put my whole hand in there, it would look like those two circles converged into one big one as my wrist was going in. And then as I pulled it out, it would seem like these circles separated and then disappeared. It's exactly, you just bump it up one dimension. So these seemingly three-dimensional objects that people are seeing are doing the exact same things. They're splitting off, they're coming back together, and it makes perfect sense if there's actually more to this thing than we can see because it's hidden in a dimension that we can't perceive. But part of it is breaching into ours. I think that's fascinating, and I don't think a bunch of people can just make that up. It's interesting too that kind of thing is in the Bible, in the book of Ezekiel, when he sees. Now these are the good guys, but when he sees that in the very first chapter, this amazing image of the throne of God and these angels are carrying it. But when you really dig into the language, it says things like their legs are like, you could say fused into like one hoof. It's really weird. Or their wings are like fused together. But when you see these same beings again in Revelation, they're all separate. The difference is because I believe they're extra dimensional. I believe angels are totally extra dimensional, whether they're fallen or not fallen. And when they interact with our three-dimensional world, it's going to look like, there's actually a term in quantum physics called extra-dimensional unfolding. And it just means that if you're of a higher dimension, in a lower dimension, it would appear as if you're taking up, like different parts are taking up the same space. So where you have like the legs of these angels coming down to one hoof, that's not really what's happening, but it definitely looks like that. And Ezekiel is just reporting what he's seeing. This was 2,600 years ago. Ezekiel's not a quantum physicist.
Yeah, by no means. And
then the wings melding together and all of that, and the way that they behave makes perfect sense. Makes perfect sense with what we now know about, and it's even been mathematically shown how extra dimensional entities or objects would interact in our world. So that's a lot, but I would probably point to something like that because it's something relatable and say aliens can't do that. If it was aliens, if it was Martians or whatever, they would have roughly the same biological capabilities we have. We can't do that. There was recently a declassified CIA document, and I don't know for sure if this account really happened, but it's interesting because it said that I think like 30 years ago or something over Siberia, there were it was like over a military base. They shot down a UFO. And the story goes that these five, what seemed to be like what we would call the Greys, these five beings came out, but then they all merged together into a ball of light and sent off this big flash and then turned the soldiers to stone, like all but two of them. And I guess because the two were behind trees or something. But I don't know if that story is actually true or not, but it's like if you were going to make up an alien story, why would you go that route with it? Because biological things, whether they're aliens or not, like no matter what kind of technology they have, they shouldn't be able to do that. That sounds like something extra dimensional entities would be able to do. And again, it behaves just the same way. These five seemingly separate things can merge into one thing and then set off this blast that turned them to stone. That kind of reminded me of the whole pillar of salt thing.
Yes, for sure.
Speaking of Days of Lot. So again, I don't know for sure if that account is true, but just the fact that stories like that are out there, and I don't see any way that, like, who would use that story to try to say, yeah, aliens exist, Martians exist, and they can somehow do this? To me, that's like, no, extra dimensional entities exist, fallen angels, just regular angels, demons possibly. Not possibly that they exist, they definitely exist. I just don't know if demons are extra dimensional or not. But at least some of these things are. And that's how they behave. People are reporting on it, not knowing what they're looking at. They don't have a background in quantum physics. So to me, that's like that's really strong evidence.
Yeah.
So that's a lot longer than 2 minutes.
Well, I thought I was experiencing time dilation as we were talking.
We'll go with that. We'll go with that.
Well, but it brings us back to, again, the fact of the matter, Jesus gave a template for understanding. And we also see, Jesus in the Olivet Discourse, he is quoting Daniel chapter 12. There's no doubt when he talked about the second half of the tribulation, after the abomination of desolation. He says, when you see it set up, Matthew 24:15, flee into the wilderness, and then this is going to be a time of tribulation that has never existed in the history of humanity. Well, that's a direct quote from Daniel 12. So he's definitely leaning in on that chapter in his own language. But also we know in that chapter that Daniel's asking for clarification for many things, and the response was, Daniel, no. Seal up the book, because seal it up until the time of the end. And at the time of the end, you would see knowledge increase, and you would see many would travel to and fro. So you see these, at least a couple descriptors there. And so now that we believe, which I would say that we it's a fact based on that passage, that we are at the time of the end. Knowledge has certainly increased.
Exponentially.
Yep,
Yeah.
exponentially, and it's continuing. And travel is,
You're living proof of that.
Yeah,
You're always in some other country.
I'm trying to get the word out.
Yeah.
And
Amen.
so you have right here, again, section 1, talking about the signs of technology and quantum sciences and transhumanism. So one of the things that you bring up here, and I think this is kind of, I would say it's mysterious for some. We don't need to go into all the detail, but I would love to I'd love to have the person listening, because we keep hearing about it. And from a Christian perspective, explain what a quantum computer is.
Sure.
Explain you have here, chapter 3, quantum consciousness. Why is this a game changer for knowledge, technology, and artificial intelligence, crunching data, as we know? That's why is that part of, we think, the end of the age?
Yeah, well, the artificial intelligence thing, and then I'll deal with the quantum computing, because I think these two are going to merge.
Yep.
The artificial intelligence thing is extra scary, because specialists are saying that within 5-6 years, it's going to have more intelligence than the culmination of every human on Earth. Meaning, it's going to be able to solve problems we can't solve. It's going to be able to shed light into mysteries that we have no idea, no way of calculating or figuring out, and it can do it basically in an instant. That's where it gets moved into quantum computing, because right now, classical computers, when they do a calculation or when they try to solve a problem, typically they have to do it like one at a time. Like they have to
sequential, basically.
Yeah, it's sequential. Quantum computers can do all of the options all at once and then find the right one. So an example that I use in my house, when you first go into my house, on the right side, there's 3 light switches, and one of them turns on and off the porch light. One of them does the living room light, and one of them doesn't do anything. And for the life of me, I just can never remember which one is which. A classical computer, to solve that problem, would turn each one on and off, one after another to figure it out, and then it would be done. What I do is more what a quantum computer does, and I just turn them all on and then just turn them all off. The only difference is when I do that, I still don't know which switch does what thing. I'm just turning on all the lights because don't want to figure it out, and I don't want to waste any time. The quantum computer would be able to tell immediately, and it could do it with more than just 3. It can do it with billions. The scary thing is, all of our biggest encryptions, things where we like government secrets or like financial information, banking, all of this, a lot of it is built on these really hard, difficult math problems involving prime numbers, these just incredibly large prime numbers. Something that, and they're equations that are so complex, it would take a classical computer billions of years to figure out. Because again, it's got to go through one at a time. It wouldn't be able to do it. But a quantum computer can do it within seconds or at most minutes. The scary thing about that is that's what all of our encryption, the important stuff, is based on. So once quantum computing hits the mainstream, like once it becomes consumer friendly, which it is now, they've actually figured out how to, one of the biggest problems in the past with quantum computers is how to make it stable, because it deals with really, really tiny particles that are really, really fragile, and any little thing can mess it all up. Well, different companies have now come up with different ways to combat this problem. There's 5 or 6 different ways right now that they're doing it, and they all work. So it's not going to be long before this is going to be mass produced for consumers. But before it gets there, it really depends on whose hands this is going to fall into. And it already exists now. So experts are worried about and warning about what's called Q Day. That's the day where quantum computing gets into the hand of, say, really anybody. It could be a hostile government or hackers or anybody, where they can use quantum computing to gain access within seconds to all the governments of the world, all their secrets, banking information. They could steal money from anybody with this stuff. And they're trying to develop protections for this called quantum computing resistant techniques. But the problem is that's going slower than the approach of Q Day. And it's because everybody's on the internet all the time, and it's all encrypted in the way that it's encrypted now. So to change all of that, you have to do that while people are still on the internet. You can't just shut down the internet for the whole world while you figure this out. And I use this analogy. It's kind of like if you found out, like in New York City, if you found out that there was a group of people that had developed a skeleton key to every building, and that this one key would work to any building in the city. So the solution is, well, we have to change the locks to every single door, but you're doing that while people are going in and out of doors and doing all these it's like impossible. That's I think that's a really good analogy for how difficult it would be to implement these quantum protections. So most likely, and I theorize in the book, most likely somebody's going to get their hands on this first before protection can be put in place, and then we live that's Q Day, and we live in a totally different world. I don't know what that looks like for people like you and me. I mean, I would probably want to pull all my money out of the bank and
so would a lot of people, right?
Get cash or silver or something. I don't know, but something. But by and large, worldwide, whoever can control this, whoever's the first to control this, can basically control the world. And that makes me think, how is it the Antichrist is able to get so much power so fast? Maybe it's something like this, or maybe it's already been put in place. Because I don't think we're going to have to wait till the tribulation to see Q Day. I think that's going to, I mean, depending, the rapture could happen now and tribulation could happen tomorrow. So it depends on how it all works out. But that's one of the major kind of frightening things that's happening right now today, and most people aren't aware of it because it's not really being publicized. It's not really out there.
Yeah, and there's no doubt that, I mean, we look at this stuff and we read about it and we're intentional. But I imagine, for I know back when I was pastoring, and I had other responsibilities, right? As you do, and I was always loved prophecy, but I wasn't necessarily reading about quantum anything full time, right, or writing about it or whatever. So you start. So the typical Christian is like, well, okay, I'm not an expert on that. It seems kind of weird, but our point here is simply to say what we're seeing is another indicator.
Yes,
that we are approaching the last days of the last days, which is again is what you're documenting here in these books. And you go into as well in the second part. Again, that was just, a small few pages of part one. Yeah. But in part two, you begin to talk about the signs and the supernatural, which again reminds me of what Jesus said, that there's supernatural interference in the days of Noah with the sons of God and the fallen angels. And we see through the book of Revelation, we see demons being unleashed. We see other angels interacting with humanity, bringing the 7 trumpets, the 7 bowls. Jesus is the one that opens the seals, but you see the 4 living creatures involved, them saying, come. So there's no doubt this window that has often been a very hard separator from our normal life. Hebrews 13:2, we entertain angel, but unaware. Right? So unaware. So that window, that dividing line between realms, if you want to say that, has been pretty stark. But that's going to change. And so I think what we're seeing, though, is I do think that most of what that description is going to happen inside the tribulation. Yeah. But we are seeing the
birth pains.
The birth pains. Yeah. That's a good way to say it as it relates to the beast system being established and implemented and the technology coming to play. So, and you talk about, again, the supernatural elements. You bring up, and this is kind of fun, you talk about shape-shifting Nephilim, angelic genetics, doppelgangers, bilocation, plasmoid orbs, Israel and the UFOs. Maybe talk for a moment at plasmoid orbs. Yeah. What in the world, if people don't know what those are, explain to the audience what those are.
Yeah, people have been seeing these things, but it's a relatively new.
Is this something I see on my camera when I see like that, a dot on there, an orb? Is that what you're referring to, or not?
Well, sometimes people will look at a star and they'll zoom in on their camera and it looks all funky and they think that's what stars really look like, or they'll think that's an angel or something. Yeah. That's just it's a phone camera. I
know different because we have telescopes to show that.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm not talking about that, but it is weird though, because some of the things that people are filming, it's not like as far away as a star, it's a lot closer, but it still does look weird. And the reason the term plasmoid orbs actually came from a scientific paper that was studying these things. And so in the book, I go into a little bit of the paper, and the paper's really complicated, as a lot of scientific papers are, but I try to break it down as best as possible. But they don't really reach any kind of conclusion. It's just basically like, yeah, something's happening. And people really started seeing these things around when the New Jersey drone stuff started happening. I don't know what the connection there is. I don't think these orbs are necessarily the drones themselves, because and again, I have to caveat it with saying any video can be faked, any picture can be faked, any interpretation can be wrong. One of the more convincing ones that I saw, though, which led me to write this chapter, actually our very own Bob Ulrich sent me. Emailed it to me, and it was a TikTok video of this, and probably a lot of people have seen it by now, but there's this TikTok video of this woman in broad daylight, and she sees something in the sky, and she zooms in on her phone, and it kind of looks like just this sort of orb with these spindly things coming out of it, and she's talking to it, and she's like, "Hi, I see you. Who are you?" But then she says, "Do you know Jesus?" And then the thing starts like vibrating and kind of.
It looked like it responded to her words.
Yeah. Look, and then she's like, "Oh, you do know Jesus. Yes, we love Jesus." And I can't say, for one thing, yes, that video absolutely could have been faked. To me, it didn't seem like it was, but I don't have a background in that. I can't tell just by looking at it. It seemed real. Could be faked. But even if it's not, I don't know if it's responding because it doesn't like the name of Jesus, or if it's like an actual angel and it's just getting excited about it, and because they're extra dimensional, we can't see the whole thing and we're just seeing a piece of it. I have no idea, but that video got so popular and other people started coming forward saying that they were seeing stuff too. So there's this phenomenon of people seeing these plasmoid orbs. I did a video on it because I wanted to know if there was something to it, and usually it helps if I get like my audience's feedback. So I said, "Hey, have any of you seen this?" And, you be honest, and it's okay if you don't have evidence of it or whatever, but just like, have any of you seen this? And overwhelmingly, I got a lot of people that said that they have seen similar things recently. It's like a recent phenomenon. And so I thought it was interesting enough to put in the book and write about it, and especially with the background of that scientific paper, it at least caught the attention of some scientific researcher writing about it. But to me, the main takeaway that I get from that from the whole phenomenon and what I write in the chapter is I really like the L.A. Marzulli approach: rebuke first, ask questions later.
Yeah, exactly.
So I advise people, if you do see something like that, a good angel will never be offended if you try to rebuke it in the name of Jesus. It just won't.
Nope.
It won't have to respond to it. It's not going to be offended. It'll actually probably expect you to do that. But if it's a fallen angel, you absolutely want to rebuke that first, or if it's something demonic. That's why you always rebuke first, ask questions later.
No, that's really good, and it's just, again, it's another determining piece of evidence where, when you look from, basically, as we know, there were people in 1947 with Roswell all the way. I mean, there's several thousand of documented sightings of something strange in the sky, UFOs. Now, some of them are Venus, some of them are that, we know. But there's others that are truly unexplainable, which is why, let's just say it, which is why our Congress is having, meetings about these unexplainable, unidentified flying objects, coming in our country, around military bases and other things, enough that the Congress is now wanting answers. There's so much evidence from whistleblowers and others. So again, it's just another sign that we're in strange times.
Yeah, totally unprecedented. And I remember I grew up on the X-Files and stuff. And in that show, it's like the government's so powerful and they'll never let these secrets go. And then anybody in the real world that pushed for government disclosure were laughed at and not taken seriously. And it's just amazing that after that Tic Tac UFO thing that most people have heard about by now, that news broke in late 2017, early 2018.
David Fravor on Tucker. Yep.
Yeah. And once that broke, all of a sudden, I think that was the first drop of disclosure. We've been having a slow drip of disclosure. There hasn't been a time where they just come out and said, "Okay, we've got this." It's seemingly slow going, but it's a lot faster now than it was like when I was a kid, where the Congress wouldn't even talk about it. News agencies wouldn't even cover it unless they were making fun of somebody.
Exactly.
And now it's being handled as an actual serious topic. So yeah, to me, it's like time is getting short. You better get right with Jesus.
Yeah, that's really, what I see, what you've written here is to do that. And then part 3, you describe the signs in the occult and demonic doctrines and practices. And again, the question that I always think about is, again, looking at the pattern of the days of Noah, in that we know from 2 Peter that Noah was a preacher of righteousness.
Yep.
And so he's out there preaching, basically got 120 years to build the ark or so. And I imagine he's building it with his sons and who else. But at the end of the day, only 8 people get on the ark.
That's right. Yeah, besides his own family, he didn't manage to.
Yep.
But it was still good that he did that. And that's why, and I take that as great encouragement. Even when we feel like we're not being listened to, Noah still was a preacher of righteousness. He still preached it knowing it's almost like a lost cause, but there's still a reason for it. And we're in, that's another big part of the days of Noah that we can never forget. We have to be out there preaching the good news, preaching the gospel. Even if people don't listen, we still have to do it. And we should do it. People will listen. Like we are in a time where it's not so bad yet that just nobody will listen.
Right.
That is coming. I think once we're out of here, that'll be more the case. But still, we're in a unique time where we can see these things happening now. And the connection with the doctrines of demons, I talk about a lot of New Age stuff in there, because a lot of Christians don't even realize they have New Age beliefs because it's crept into the church. And even a lot of these beliefs come from these supposed aliens that are piloting these UFOs. They'll tell people we're going to bring you to a higher level of consciousness. They preach New Age stuff all the time. And so people buy into this. People that are really into ancient aliens, they're almost always into New Age. If you've ever seen one episode of Ancient Aliens, it's steeped in New Age. And,
absolutely, yes.
And so, but the New Age aspect of it has been so ignored. Most Christians, without knowing it, have at least one New Age belief and don't realize it's New Age. One of the biggest ones is how many Christians out there are doing yoga. And I'll tell you, I did not expect this, but I get more blowback from that than about anything else. People really want to hold on to their yoga, and they want to say it's not non-Christian, it's not demonic. Yes, it absolutely is. That those specific poses were taught by fallen angels posing as gods in India long time ago. To venerate these things. There have been people that have been damaged, psychologically and even physically damaged from doing yoga. And the thing is, if it's just for health, do calisthenics, do some stretches, go to your chiropractor and ask for some stretches you can do. If it's purely for health, why does it have to be yoga? But I get so much pushback on it, and I think it's because these doctrines are addictive. Whether they realize it or not, they're addictive. I years and years ago, before I got into ministry and everything, I was in New Age for the same reason. It's spiritually addictive, and that's really dangerous. So I would suggest, that's one thing of a few others that I talk about in the book, but I would suggest if you're doing yoga, get out of yoga class, get out of that and just do, or if you're at a church that's teaching yoga classes, don't deal with it. Just do calisthenics or do Pilates, or there's a million other things you can do to be healthy.
Yeah, because I mean, that's always the challenge that I've had is like you said, calisthenics, because I think, if I'm going to stretch in a certain way, if Satan labels it, does he own it now?
Right.
And I'm like, well, wait a minute, I should still be able to stretch.
And that's a lot, yeah.
In the sense of, like you said, calisthenics or something that, because I know that, I don't even know the names because I don't really do yoga, but I do know that there's certain stretches. If I put my hands out and I put for my own back, it's really nice. And people are like, oh, you're doing yoga? And I go, no, I don't, never done yoga. Is that what you call yoga? And they're like, well, that's a stretch. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm doing it because it helps my back out. I'm not chanting.
If it's a stretch you get from your doctor or whatever, but those specific yogic stretches were actually, they were taught to mankind from the fallen angels, saying, do this. This is how you venerate us. And that's in modern day yoga too. Yeah. So it's like, and I don't blame, if somebody, if a Christian gets into yoga and they just don't know, I think most of them don't know. And then when they find out, they're like, okay, well, I don't want to deal with it then. Yeah. I think that's all perfectly fine. But when I get so much pushback from people. Yeah, that
makes you wonder.
That's like, that is a weird thing to really want to hold on to.
Yeah, why you hold on to that?
Because you can still stretch.
Yeah, exactly. Because and God knows the heart in that regard. And so the fourth section here, again, we're just overviewing some of this and very fascinating topics. You talk about the future for believers, the Dead Sea Scrolls rapture, future bodies of believers, and then you talk about signs in love. So I mean, as we think, it's one thing to look at, hey, everybody, this is only the beginning, like you mentioned, birth pangs, of getting into what Jesus described as the end of the age, the days of the Son of Man, which we know it's only going to get 10 times, 1,000 times worse, right? But in the midst of all this, we have hope and we have confidence, and you spend a chapter talking about the future bodies of believers. Kind of explain that. Yeah.
Well, it's just I wanted to end the book by saying, look, we have a future. We don't have to fear this stuff. We should be aware of it for sure. That's the whole point of everything that came before the last couple of chapters. We need to be aware of it, but we don't have to fear it. We have all of these signs. If you're a believer, point to something good for us. We're going to be raptured. We're going to be, translated. We're going to be changed. This corruptible flesh is going to put on the incorruptible. And so I spent that chapter kind of dealing with what does that exactly look like? Because when I was growing up, I kind of thought, and I don't want to dog on my church that I grew up on too much, because they are the ones that introduced me to Jesus. Mm-hmm. So, I'm saved because but it was really surface level stuff. So I kind of thought, okay, when we get raptured, and it was a pre-trib rapture church and everything, but we're basically going to sort of be like clones of Jesus. And in a sense, I was almost worried that we were going to lose our personality, like our personality, like everything about us is going to be changed, where we're basically like not even ourselves anymore. And that's not the case. Like, God created you as an individual, me as an individual. We'll just be our perfected selves. We won't be sinning anymore. There's times throughout the day where I'm spending time with my family and I'm not sinning in that moment. Yeah, I think it's just going to be like that, but just always and obviously way better. We can't comprehend how amazing it's going to be, but it's not going to change our personalities in that way. God made us an individual for a reason. So it really just goes through some of the physical changes that we'll go through, some of the new capabilities we'll have. And I think one of our best examples is when Jesus was resurrected.
Yeah.
He's the first fruits. It probably makes sense that that's our best go-to thing. And isn't it interesting that I love the account where they're all in a room and it's all closed and everything, and Jesus is just there. It's like he went through the wall almost. Yep. Extra dimensional stuff. And so I believe that our future bodies are going to be glorified. They're going to be, in a sense, we would say, celestial or spiritual or whatever. But I think that's synonymous with extra dimensional. And I believe that's what we were always supposed to be, and but with sin and everything, that degraded everything. So that's mainly what that chapter was about, to just give some people some hope and say, hey, and if you're not a Christian and reading this, you should seriously give Jesus some more thought, because you don't want the future that you'll get as a non-believer. You want this future. Absolutely. You want this glorified future where you get to escape all of that in a very good way. So yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, and we again, seeing your chapter, we take great comfort. Philippians 3, 20 and 21, we see in 1 Corinthians 15 that it says clear that our lowly body is going to be conformed into something like his glorious body. And we bear the image of the earthly man, we're going to bear the image of the heavenly man. So you have at least two references of that our new body, our new glorified body, which is going to be like his. So we don't have to guess about it. We don't have to speculate. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And again, looking at some of these characteristics of what he was capable of is fun as well. Well, Josh, appreciate your time as always. Here we have Supernatural Signs of the End Times, the Final Cataclysm. And if you want to pick up the book, certainly prophecywatchers.com. Check it out. Again, we were only able to scratch the surface on all the different topics. You spend a lot on CERN in here, New Age beliefs, and again, other things that are just, we're living in the time. That's pretty fascinating. So thanks everybody for listening today. I hope you enjoyed it, and continue if you're watching this on places where you can subscribe. We don't often say that, but I encourage you to subscribe, because we're always keeping our eyes out on things that are happening, and we want to keep you informed, and it's fun. It's a good time. So thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.